guys, Jim here again to bring you guys another MMA 5 finish. This time I'm covering the UFC 173's co-main event that features a light heavyweight title eliminator bout between dangerous Dan Henderson, the former two-time Prix champion and Strikeforce light heavyweight champion, when he battles the former Strikeforce heavyweight Grand Prix winner in Daniel DC Cormier for the right to face the light heavyweight champion of the world. I will give you guys a short fight profile as well as a full fight breakdown of two fighters and who I have ultimately winning and moving one step closer to becoming the #1 contender for the light heavyweight championship next year. Now, without further ado, let's get some Henderson, Cormier. All right. Now, at the start of 2014, Daniel Cormier was riding a wave of momentum. You know, he's undefeated. He was a perfect 13-0 in his mixed martial arts career at heavyweight, and he was finally dropping down to 205 in a title eliminator bout against Rashad Evans at UFC 170. But that bout was scrapped, and he was going to fight one of his old wrestling rivals, Pat Cummins. I think the UFC did their best to hype this fight up as best they could and make it look like Pat Cummins was actually going to be a legitimate threat to Daniel Cormier, especially that whole bit about Pat making Daniel open up the waterworks, you know, in training. At the end of the day, we all knew this fight was a glorified squash match. Come on. Who the hell was Pat Cummins really fought in mixed martial arts? A bunch of unknown guys. And you look at who DC has fought. Top veterans and world champions. There's a difference in experience and there's a difference in talent. The end result, you know, Daniel smashed Cummins via TKO and collected his paycheck, because all that really was a glorified sparring session. Pat had nothing for him, period. And now he's going to go one-on-one against dangerous Dan Henderson in a title eliminator bout at UFC 170. And Dan, for the most part, hadn't been looking good for a long time. I mean, that guy was like on a 3-fight rut. To the likes of Lyoto Machida at UFC 157 in the co-main event. He dropped a split decision to him in a very ugly fight where neither one of these guys looked really good, but Machida did enough in the judges' eyes than Dan did, taking the decision. And then when he fought Rashad, he lost another close fight by split decision. I mean, he definitely got that first round by rocking Rashad. I mean, he was able to defend all Rashad's takedowns for the most part, except for that time Rashad did get him down. But in the second and third, Rashad was more busier of the two, and he took those, and he won the fight by split decision. And to add insult to injury, he suffered a head kick knockout by Vitor Belfort, thus ending Dan's mystique of never being knocked out. He hasn't been the same guy in the last couple of outings that knocked out Babalu, that took out Feijiao, that KO Fedor, and fought the fight of the year against Mauricio Shogun Rua at UFC 139. The reason for Dan's failures in his last couple of fights is this unwillingness to utilize his bread and butter. I mean, yes, you want to be exciting for the fans, but dude, you can't discard what brought you to the dance in the first place, which is your wrestling. your offensive wrestling. Now, it's great to be defensive, but you also have to be offensive because you need to keep the guy guessing at all times. You know, he's got to use all of his weapons in his fights if he wants to be successful. However, Dan Henderson would make a comeback against Shogun in Brazil. When the fight got underway, Mauricio Shogun was setting the tone. He was outworking Dan Henderson on the feet. He rocked Dan in both round 1 and round 2 and had him in all kinds of trouble. Dan couldn't even get a takedown. And heading into that 3rd round, it felt like the beginning of the end. However, he was able to rally in the 3rd and get Shogun's timing right and knock him out with that right hook. Now, he is one fight away from fighting for that UFC Light Heavyweight Championship should he defeat Daniel Cormier. And I would say that's going to be a tall order for Dan. If he continues to fight the way he does, it doesn't help that he can't use the magical TRT anymore. And although I will say, you know, he was able to be competitive with Rashad Evans without it, but DC is a much better fighter than both him and Rashad. And for Daniel Cormier, a victory over Dan Henderson gets him closer to that date with destiny against his arch rival John Jones for the Light Heavyweight Championship of the world. And I know he'd love nothing more to dethrone Jones, leave him in a pile of his own blood, and bring that belt back to San Jose, baby. That being said, he has to get past Dan Henderson, and John's got to get past Alexander Gustafsson before that fight can materialize. Now, nevertheless, let's break it down, shall we? Now, when it comes down to the height, you know, there's not really that much of a disparity because, I mean, Dan's got like, what, an inch on him? He's like 5'11", Daniel's like 5'10". When it comes to reach, same thing. And Henderson has a 71-inch reach, while Daniel Cormier has a 72-inch reach, so there's 1 inch difference there. Nevertheless, from a cardio perspective, Daniel Cormier, I feel, has a superior gas tank to Dan Henderson. He can go a full 3 rounds or a full 5 rounds without showing any ill effect. He's used to the light heavyweight weight cut now, and he paces himself really good. For Dan Henderson, his cardio is rather inconsistent at times because he's great in the early goings of the fight, but as the fight progresses to the latter stage, he starts to tire or just runs out of gas. As seen when he fought Jake Shields, he was great in the first round, but he ran out of gas in the second, and Jake was able to dominate the fight thereafter. And when he fought against Mauricio Shogun, he was great in the first 3 rounds, but he was exhausted in the championship rounds, and he just didn't have enough cardio to complete what he started against Anderson Silva, and the rest is history. But I hope in this fight, you know, he's put together a solid strength and conditioning program in anticipation for this fight, because if his cardio isn't up to snuff, he's in for a long night. But anyways, I give the cardio advantage to Daniel Cormier because his cardio is more consistent. When it comes down to the striking aspect of this fight, I gotta give it to Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier is a more dynamic, complete striker with excellent kickboxing, great hand speed, and kicks that find their aim. He's got power in his hands, and if he connects clean on you, you're going down. In contrast, Dan Henderson is a one-dimensional striker who primarily relies on his boxing. And his main weapons consist of big overhand right, affectionately dubbed the H-bomb, which has knocked out the likes of Michael Bisping and Rafael Feijiao. His uppercut, and he's got a pretty good right-left cross as well. And let's not forget that spinning back fist he hit on Vanderlei Silva to knock him out. But he throws kicks like a first-rate amateur. Not to mention, his chin has been loosened up. And if he fights standing up the way he's been doing, without setting up the proper combinations and feints to land that overhand right or right hook, he's in a world of trouble. Against DC, the wrestling aspect of this fight, Daniel Cormier is an Olympic freestyle wrestler, Dan Henderson, an Olympic Greco-Roman wrestler. However, when we judge the wrestling aspect of this fight based upon effectiveness and application, it's Daniel Cormier all the way, because Daniel Cormier is more active in both an offensive and defensive approach with his wrestling. He has smooth transitions when he's trying to take you down when he's striking with you, or he has you backed up against the fence in the clinch, and he's never been taken down whatsoever. As opposed to Dan Henderson, who's more inclined to use his wrestling in reverse and keep the fight on the feet and stand and bang, which I find is rather stupid because, you know, when Dan is on, he's got excellent double leg takedowns, Greco clinch. The fact is, you know, Dan is more concerned with keeping it on the feet and not using his offensive skills when it comes to wrestling. And even though his defensive wrestling is good, he has been taken down by non-wrestlers like Shogun Rua, Ricardo Arona, as well as low-level wrestlers like Jake Shields. And above all, I don't think Daniel Cormier is going to have much of an issue getting this guy to the mat. If he can launch a 250-pound heavyweight like Josh Barnett up in the air like nothing, I'm pretty sure he'll be able to take down a bloated middleweight like Dan Henderson. As far as the ground game aspect of this fight is concerned, I doubt it will be that much of an issue in this fight other than, you know, top control and ground and pound. Because while Daniel Cormier is a brown belt in Missouri Jiu-Jitsu, we haven't seen him apply any of that in his fights other than getting out of the submission from Josh Barnett. Dan Henderson, we've seen him attempt submissions off his back, but he's not exactly a jiu-jitsu wizard like Fabricio Verdum or Frank Mir. And even if he attempts to do it out of desperation, Daniel will just defend it and make him pay for it. It is what it is. Everything accounted for in this fight as far as factors are concerned. When we judge this fight as a whole, and we look at it from a realistic standpoint, it's clear who the winner is going to be. And I'm sorry to burst your bubble, all of you Dan Henderson fans that are hoping for one more miracle. They're just hoping to God that he's going to come out there and land that lucky-ass H-bomb and knock DC out. Because, ladies and gents, that will not happen. Because he has regressed and not progressed in the last couple of years. And this is mixed martial arts, and if you don't evolve, you get left behind. His chin just ain't what it used to be anymore. Most importantly, he is predictable. You know exactly what he's going to do when he fights. It's no secret. And against a guy who's just better than him overall like DC, he's just going to destroy, baby. And when they go one-on-one, this is what the fight is going to look like. And Daniel's going to go out there picking Dan Henderson apart methodically. DC is going to keep this fight at kickboxing range. He's going to outslick and outstrike Dan Henderson on the feet. He's going to hit him with a multitude of shots. Catch him when he's sleeping. Cut angles. Evade all of Dan Henderson's big shots. Find a home for those body kicks and low kicks. Shoot for takedowns. Take him down. Smash his face with ground and pound, elbows and hammer fists. And just bust him up. He's going to counter strike Dan Henderson and capitalize on all of his mistakes. And when Dan misses that H-bomb, he can expect to get another head kick to his jaw. And he's going to go down. And Daniel's going to follow up with ground and pound and finish this fight via KO. And there you have it. The execution of Dan Henderson is carried out without a hitch. My prediction for this fight: Daniel Cormier knocks Dan Henderson into the next millennium. Or he physically dissects him, busts him up, and scores a decision. And with that, Daniel Cormier will assert himself as the next #1 contender for whomever comes out with the gold in the John Jones and Alexander Gustafsson rematch next year in 2015. I know Daniel's hoping John comes out victorious against Gustafsson, so he gets his shot at his arch rival. And we, the fans, finally get another fight we've been demanding for such a long time. And for Dan Henderson, I hope after this ass whipping that is going to be inflicted on him, that he comes to his senses and retires. Because there's nothing left for him to prove. He's done more than most fighters ever do in their careers. He's a 3-time world champion. He's been in a Hall of Fame list of opponents in Fedor, Big Nog, Babalu Subral, Mauricio Shogun Hua, Vanderlei Silva, and the list goes on. That UFC title was just too far away for you to reach. He should probably jump back down to 185. That'll do it for this fight prediction video. I'll see you guys for the next one. This is Jim signing off.